The crimson flames danced between Elder Zythak's massive claws as the ancient dragon settled his enormous frame against the cavern wall. The firelight cast dancing shadows across his scarred bronze scales, each mark telling stories of battles fought across millennia. Around him, a dozen young dragonlings huddled closer, their smaller forms barely reaching his knee joints. Their eyes sparkled with curiosity and excitement, reflecting the warm glow of the ceremonial fire. "Tell us about the old times, Elder," whispered Syrinx, the smallest of the group. Her silver scales shimmered as she pressed closer to the warmth. "Tell us about when dragons ruled everything." Zythak's ancient eyes, deep amber pools that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, turned toward the eager young faces. A low rumble emanated from deep within his chest, part amusement, part something else entirely, something that might have been regret. "Ah, little ones," he began, his voice carrying the weight of eons. "You wish to hear of glory days, of when our kind soared through star systems as undisputed masters of the cosmos. But tonight, I will tell you a different tale, a true tale, one that will prepare you for the reality of the universe we now inhabit." The dragonlings exchanged glances, some disappointed by the promise of truth rather than heroic legends. But they remained silent, knowing better than to interrupt an elder's wisdom. Zythak extended one massive claw toward the fire, and the flames responded to his will, growing brighter and taking on hues of blue and gold. Within the dancing light, images began to form, ghostly and ethereal, but clear enough for the young ones to see. "Picture, if you will, a time 5,000 years past," Zythak continued, his voice taking on the cadence of ancient storytelling. "The galaxy was young in terms of spacefaring civilizations. We dragons had already mastered the art of dimensional flight, moving between star systems as easily as you now move between chambers in this mountain. Our colonies spanned hundreds of worlds, each one shaped to our needs and desires. The images in the fire showed magnificent dragons, larger and more powerful than any that live today, soaring through the void between planets. Their scales gleamed like living metal, and energy crackled around their forms as they manipulated the very fabric of space-time. "We were giants in those days," Zythak said, a note of pride creeping into his ancient voice. "Not just in body, but in power. A mature dragon could level mountains with their breath, reshape continents with their will. We lived for thousands of years, accumulating knowledge and magical power that made us seem like gods to the lesser species we encountered." Young Corvain, his blue scales rippling with excitement, could not contain himself. "We were the strongest, the smartest, the most powerful beings in the universe. Indeed, young one. Or so we believed." Zythak's tone shifted, becoming more somber. "We had encountered many species in our expansion across the galaxy. The crystalline Vex, who communicated through harmonic resonance and could manipulate matter at the molecular level. The gas-form ethereals, beings of pure energy who existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The hive-minded cluster, whose collective intelligence spanned entire planets." The fire images shifted, showing these alien species in their full glory and strangeness. The dragonlings watched in wonder at the diversity of life the universe had produced. "Each species we met was formidable in their own way," Zythak continued. "But none could match our combination of individual power, longevity, and magical ability. We treated them as we saw fit, sometimes as allies, sometimes as subjects, sometimes as obstacles to be removed. We were the apex predators of the cosmos, and we acted accordingly." The elder dragon paused, his ancient memories clearly bringing both pleasure and pain. The firelight flickered across his scarred features, highlighting the weariness in his eyes. "But there was one species we barely noticed in those early days. One that seemed so unremarkable, so utterly ordinary, that most dragons dismissed them entirely. They called themselves humans." A ripple of amusement passed through the young dragons. Syrinx actually giggled, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Humans?" she asked incredulously. "Those little pink creatures?" "But elder, they live barely 100 years. They have no natural weapons. No armor, no magical abilities at all. They cannot even survive in the vacuum of space without their artificial shells. Precisely, little one. That was exactly what we thought. Zythak's expression grew more serious. They were mammals, you see, evolved from some primitive ape-like creatures on a small blue world they called Earth. When we first encountered them, roughly 4,000 years ago, they had barely begun to explore their own solar system. The images in the fire now showed early humans, crude and primitive by dragon standards. They wore bulky spacesuits and traveled in metal contraptions that seemed laughably inefficient compared to a dragon's natural ability to traverse the void. Their lifespans were indeed short by our standards, Zythak admitted. Their bodies were fragile, requiring constant environmental support to survive in space. They had no breath weapons, no natural armor, no ability to manipulate energy with thought alone. By every measure we understood, they should have remained a minor, planetary-bound species for millennia to come. Corvain snorted, a small puff of smoke escaping his nostrils. Then why are you telling us about them, Elder? Surely there are more worthy species to discuss? Zythak's ancient gaze fixed upon the young blue dragon, and for a moment, Corvain felt the full weight of millennia pressing down upon him. The Elder's voice, when he spoke, carried an edge that made all the Dragonlings sit straighter. Because, young Corvain, those supposedly inferior humans accomplished something that no other species in the galaxy had ever achieved. Something that should have been impossible. Something that changed the very nature of galactic civilization forever. The fire flared higher, and the images within began to move more rapidly, showing the passage of centuries in moments. The human vessels grew larger, more sophisticated. Their numbers increased exponentially. Where once there had been single exploration ships, now there were fleets. You see, what we failed to understand was that humans possessed something we had never encountered before. Not magical power or physical might, but something far more dangerous. They had what they called adaptability, innovation, and an absolute refusal to accept limitations. The Dragonlings watched, mesmerized, as the fire images showed human expansion across their solar system. Mars turned from a barren red world to a thriving garden planet. The asteroid belt became a massive mining and manufacturing complex. Even the gas giants were turned to human purposes, their atmospheres harvested for fuel, their moons converted to habitats. While we dragons were content with our power and saw no need for change, humans never stopped improving. Zythak continued. Each generation built upon the knowledge of the previous one. Each challenge they faced drove them to develop new solutions. Their short lifespans, which we saw as a weakness, became their greatest strength. How could living a short time be a strength? Asked Syrinx, her silver head tilted in confusion. Because they were always in a hurry, little one. A dragon might spend a century contemplating a problem, secure in the knowledge that we had thousands of years to find a solution. But humans knew they might die tomorrow, so they had to solve problems immediately. This urgency drove them to attempt things that seemed impossible. The elder dragon gestured to the fire, and the images showed human scientists working frantically in laboratories. Engineers building machines of incredible complexity, explorers pushing into dangerous unknowns that would have given even dragons pause. But more than that, Zythak continued, they possessed something we dragons, in our individual power, had never truly developed. They were collaborative in a way that transcended even the cluster's hive mind. Where we relied on personal might, humans learned to pool their collective intelligence and effort. The fire images shifted to show massive human projects. Space elevators that reached from planetary surfaces to orbital stations. Generation ships, designed to carry millions of humans to distant stars. Communication networks that spanned light years and allowed real-time coordination across vast distances. Watch carefully now, Zythak said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. This is where the story becomes truly remarkable. The images showed the first contact between dragons and humans in detail. A dragon patrol, led by a magnificent crimson elder named Vorthak, had encountered a human exploration fleet near the edge of what dragons considered their territory. By all accounts, it should have been a brief interaction. The dragons would assert their dominance, the humans would acknowledge it, and both species would go their separate ways. Elder Vorthak was ancient even by our standards, Zythak explained. Nearly 6,000 years old, with power enough to crack moons and wisdom gathered across millennia, he approached the human fleet with the casual confidence of a being who had never encountered his equal. The Dragonlings watched as the fire image Vorthak materialized near the human ships, his massive form dwarfing even their largest vessels. Energy crackled around his scales, and space itself seemed to bend to his will. The humans did something unexpected, Zythak continued. They did not flee. They did not grovel. Instead, they sent a communication requesting dialogue. When Vorthak agreed to speak with them, they proposed something that had never been offered to dragons before. Young Corvain leaned forward eagerly. What did they propose, Elder? Trade, Zythak said simply. Not tribute, not submission, but mutual exchange. They offered to share their knowledge and resources in return for ours. Several of the Dragonlings looked confused. In their understanding, other species gave tribute to dragons, not the other way around. Vorthak was amused, Zythak continued. What could these short-lived creatures possibly possess that would interest beings like us? But the humans were persistent, and they made their case with a logic that was compelling. The fire images showed holographic displays that the humans had shared with Vorthak, demonstrating their technologies and achievements. The dragons watching had expected to see primitive accomplishments, easily dismissed. What Vorthak saw changed everything, Zythak said, his voice heavy with memory. In the short time since we had first encountered humans, barely 4 centuries, they had transformed not just their own solar system, but had begun expanding beyond it. They had developed faster than light travel using principles that even our greatest scholars did not fully understand. The images showed human ships entering what they called hyperspace, disappearing from normal reality and reappearing light years away in a matter of hours. It was crude compared to dragon dimensional travel, but it was their own development, achieved through pure innovation rather than magical ability. More than that, Zythak continued, they had begun encountering and incorporating other species into their civilization. Not as subjects or servants, but as partners. They were learning, adapting, improving at a rate that should have been impossible. The Dragonlings watched in growing amazement as the fire images showed human cities that included dozens of different alien species, all working together on projects of staggering scope and complexity. How? Whispered Syrinx. How could they convince so many different species to work with them? That, said Zythak, settling back against the cavern wall, is the beginning of the secret I must share with you. And to understand it fully, you must hear what happened next. When dragons and humans began to interact in earnest, the ancient dragon's eyes grew distant, and the fire dimmed slightly, leaving the Dragonlings hanging on his every word. Around them, the cavern seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the continuation of a tale that would change everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. But that part of the story, Zythak said with a slight smile that held no humor, will require preparation. For what I must tell you next may shake your understanding of what it means to be a dragon in this modern age. The Elder's claws traced patterns in the stone floor, and the Dragonlings could sense the weight of untold revelations waiting to unfold. The fire crackled softly in the silence that followed Zythak's words. The Dragonlings remained perfectly still, their young minds struggling to process what they had heard. Finally, young Corvain could contain himself no longer. Elder, he began hesitantly, you speak as if these humans became important somehow, but surely our ancestors could have simply destroyed them if they proved troublesome? Zythak's ancient eyes fixed upon the young blue dragon, and a sound that might have been laughter rumbled deep in his chest. But there was no mirth in it. Destroy them. The Elder shook his massive head slowly. Oh, young one. That is precisely what Elder Vorthak attempted to do when he realized the true scope of human expansion, and that attempt taught our kind a lesson we have never forgotten. The fire flared again, and new images danced within its depths. This time, they showed the aftermath of that first diplomatic contact, when dragons had returned to their council worlds to debate what should be done about the rapidly expanding human civilization. The Dragon Council convened on Pyraxis Prime, Zythak continued. his voice taking on a formal tone that suggested he was recounting historical events of great importance. 50 of our most powerful elders gathered to discuss the human question. The debate raged for months. The fire images showed magnificent dragons in heated discussion, their voices shaking the very foundations of their mountain stronghold. Some argued for immediate action, others for careful observation, and a few for attempting the proposed trade agreements. Elder Vorthak spoke passionately for decisive action, Zythak said. He had studied the humans more closely since that first encounter. And what he discovered alarmed him. In just the few months since first contact, human expansion had accelerated even further. They were establishing colonies in star systems previously unknown to them, making contact with species dragons had not yet encountered, and sharing technologies freely with any who would accept them. Young Syrinx shifted nervously. That doesn't sound so dangerous, Elder. Surely spreading their knowledge would make them weaker, not stronger? That is what we thought, Zethak admitted. We could not understand why any species would freely share their advantages with potential competitors. In our experience, power was finite. If one being grew stronger, others necessarily grew weaker. The humans seemed to believe the opposite. The images in the fire shifted to show human colonies working alongside alien partners. Crystalline Vex provided their matter manipulation abilities to construct impossible architecture, while humans contributed their engineering knowledge. Ethereal beings shared their multi-dimensional perception, while humans offered their rapid problem-solving abilities. What the humans understood, and what we dragons failed to grasp, was that knowledge and capability could be multiplied rather than divided, Zythak explained. Each species they encountered added new perspectives and abilities to their collective understanding. They were not weakening themselves by sharing their technology. They were creating something greater than the sum of its parts. End quote. The ancient dragon paused, his expression growing darker. Elder Vorthok saw this rapid expansion as a direct threat to dragon supremacy. He convinced the council that humans must be contained before they grew beyond our ability to control them. The decision was made to demonstrate dragon power in a way that would convince the humans to accept permanent limitations on their expansion. A chill seemed to settle over the cavern, despite the warmth of the fire. The Dragonlings instinctively pressed closer together, as Zythak's voice grew grimmer. Vorthok chose a newly established human colony called New Geneva as his target. It was a research station built in partnership with several alien species, studying the unique properties of a binary star system. To Vorthok, it represented everything dangerous about human expansion. Their willingness to share knowledge, their rapid establishment of new settlements, and their growing influence over other species. The fire images now showed Vorthok approaching the colony, his massive form wreathed in the energies of dimensional travel. The research station was small by dragon standards, home to perhaps 50,000 beings of various species. Vorthok's plan was simple, Zythak continued. He would destroy the colony utterly, leaving no survivors to carry tales of dragon displeasure. Then he would seek out the human leadership and offer them a choice. Accept the boundaries dragons set for them, or face the complete annihilation of their species. Corvain's eyes were wide with anticipation. And did he succeed, Elder? Did Vorthok show the humans their proper place? Zythak was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire as if seeing events from long ago. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made the Dragonlings shiver. Vorthok arrived at New Geneva, expecting to find a helpless research outpost. What he discovered instead changed the course of galactic history forever. The fire images showed Vorthok materializing in space near the colony, his power already building for a devastating attack. But as he prepared to unleash destruction, something unprecedented happened. The colony's defenses activated, Zythak said quietly, but they were not what any dragon had ever encountered before. The humans had not built walls or shields or weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, they had created something entirely new. The images showed energy patterns unlike anything the Dragonlings had ever seen. Rather than trying to block or deflect Vorthok's power, The human defenses seemed to redirect and transform it. The humans had learned to manipulate probability itself, Zethak explained, his voice filled with something that might have been awe or fear. Working with their ethereal partners, they had developed technology that could alter the likelihood of events occurring. When Vorthak unleashed his most powerful attack, intending to crack the planet's crust and boil away its atmosphere, the probability field around New Geneva changed the fundamental nature of what was possible. The Dragonlings watched in stunned silence as the fire images showed Vorthak's devastating energy beam striking the colony's defenses and simply stopping. Not blocked, not reflected, but transformed into something else entirely. The energy that should have destroyed New Geneva instead became a cascade of creation, Zethak continued. Matter and energy reorganized themselves according to new probability matrices. Where Vorthak had intended death, life flourished. The barren moon orbiting the research station suddenly bloomed with forests and oceans. The binary star's radiation, instead of being deadly, became a source of incredible fertility. Syrinx made a small sound of disbelief. That's impossible, Elder. Even we dragons cannot create life from death energy. Precisely, Zethak said grimly. That was the moment our kind first realized we might not be dealing with another conventional species. But the demonstration was not finished. The images showed Vorthak, his massive form trembling with rage and confusion, preparing for another attack. This time, he gathered not just his own power, but began drawing energy from the very fabric of space-time itself, preparing to unleash forces that could destroy entire solar systems. And then, Zethak said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, the humans did something that no dragon in history had ever experienced. The fire seemed to hold its breath, the images frozen in anticipation. They fought back. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Around the fire, the Dragonlings exchanged glances of confusion and disbelief. Fought back? Corvain repeated incredulously. But Elder, how could such weak creatures possibly threaten one of our most powerful elders? That is the question that haunts our kind to this day, Zethak replied. The humans did not fight as individuals. They did not rely on personal power or magical ability. Instead, they demonstrated their greatest strength, their ability to act as a unified collective, while maintaining individual creativity and initiative. The fire images resumed, showing something that defied all dragon understanding of warfare. Instead of a single powerful being facing Vorthak, thousands of humans and their alien partners began acting in perfect coordination from across multiple star systems. Human colonies throughout their sphere of influence began working together, Zethak explained. Scientists shared calculations in real time across light-years of distance. Engineers implemented modifications to their probability technology faster than should have been possible. Artists and philosophers contributed insights that somehow enhanced the effectiveness of their quantum manipulations. The images showed a network of activity that spanned dozens of worlds, all focused on a single goal: stopping Elder Vorthak's attack. But most remarkably, Zethak continued, they did not attempt to destroy Vorthak, even faced with annihilation. The humans sought a solution that would preserve all life, including that of their attacker. The Dragonlings watched in amazement as human technology created what appeared to be a bubble of altered reality around both Vorthak and New Geneva. Inside this bubble, the fundamental forces of physics began operating according to different rules. Vorthak found himself in a space where his power still existed but could only be used constructively, Zethak explained. His breath weapon, instead of incinerating matter, began healing damaged space-time. His dimensional abilities, rather than allowing him to escape, started stabilizing the quantum fluctuations around the colony. The ancient dragon's expression grew distant, as if he were remembering something painful. For 7 days and nights, Vorthak raged within that altered space, trying desperately to find a way to cause harm. But every application of his power only created more beauty, more life, more wonder. The humans had trapped one of our most powerful elders in a prison of enforced benevolence. The fire images showed the aftermath of that strange battle. Vorthak, his massive form exhausted and confused, finally ceasing his attacks and floating motionless in space. Around him, the New Geneva system had been transformed into something of impossible beauty. Planets with crystal spires reaching into space. Aurora that sang in harmonious frequencies, life forms that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When the humans finally released him, Zythak said softly, Vorthak was changed. Not physically, but mentally. He had experienced something that challenged every assumption about the nature of power and conflict that dragons had held for millennia. Young Syrinx spoke hesitantly. What happened to Elder Vorthak after that, Elder Zythak? He returned to the Dragon Council, Zythak replied. But his report was so disturbing, so contrary to everything we understood about the universe, that many elders refused to believe him. They accused him of cowardice, of fabricating excuses for his failure to destroy a mere human colony. The ancient dragon's claws scraped against the stone floor, leaving deep furrows in the rock. A second expedition was organized, he continued. This time, 5 of our most powerful elders would travel together to human space, carrying weapons and artifacts accumulated over millennia of dragon civilization. They would demonstrate once and for all that no species, regardless of their strange technologies, could stand against dragon might when properly applied. The Dragonlings leaned forward eagerly, expecting to hear of glorious victory. But Zythak's expression remained somber. That expedition never returned, he said simply. The words fell into silence, like stones into a deep well. For long moments, no one spoke. Finally, Corvain found his voice. Never returned? But Elder, that's impossible. 5 of our greatest elders, with the most powerful artifacts of our civilization? What could have happened to them? Zythak's ancient eyes reflected the firelight as he gazed at each young face in turn. That, he said slowly, is where the true secret begins to reveal itself. For the fate of those 5 elders taught our kind something about humans that we had never suspected. Something that changed our understanding of what we were truly dealing with. The elder dragon stirred the fire with one massive claw, sending sparks dancing upward into the cavern's shadows. But to understand what happened to them, you must first understand what humans had become in the time since Vorthak's failed attack. For while dragons debated and planned, humanity continued to evolve at a pace that defied all previous galactic history. The fire flared higher, casting new shadows that seemed to dance with anticipation of revelations yet to come. The silence stretched between Zythak's words and the eager anticipation of the young Dragonlings. The ancient fire continued to dance, its flames now taking on deeper hues of purple and gold, as if responding to the weight of the revelations to come. Syrinx was the first to break the silence, her silver scales trembling slightly. Elder Zythak, she whispered. What happened to those 5 great elders? Where did they go? Too well. The ancient dragon's expression grew complex, mixing sadness, pride, and something that might have been wonder. He extended his claws toward the fire once more, and the flames responded by creating images more vivid and detailed than any they had shown before. To answer that question, little ones, I must first tell you what humanity had accomplished during the decades following Vorthak's encounter at New Geneva. Zythak began. For while our Dragon Council debated and argued, humans continued their impossible rate of development. The fire images showed human space in the years following the incident at New Geneva. What the Dragonlings saw defied their understanding of how civilizations were supposed to grow. Humanity had not simply expanded to more star systems, Zythak explained. They had begun to transform the very nature of space itself. Working with their growing alliance of alien partners, they had developed what they called collaborative reality zones. Regions of space where the combined will and imagination of multiple species could alter physical laws in controlled ways. The images showed entire sectors of space that operated according to impossible principles. Planets existed in stable orbits around stars that should have torn them apart. Life flourished in the vacuum of space itself, sustained by the collective belief of thousands of different species. Faster-than-light travel had been replaced by something that transcended the very concept of distance. But most remarkably, Zythak continued, They had begun to understand consciousness itself as a fundamental force of the universe, equal to gravity or electromagnetism. They discovered that when multiple species worked together with shared purpose and understanding, their combined consciousness could reshape reality at the quantum level. Young Corvain shook his head in disbelief. Elder, this sounds like magic. But humans have no magical abilities. That is what we thought. Zythak agreed. But the humans taught us that what we call magic is simply consciousness, interacting with reality in ways we had never properly understood. Dragons had always approached this interaction individually, one mighty mind imposing its will upon the universe. Humans had learned to weave thousands of minds together into something far more powerful than any individual consciousness could achieve. The ancient dragon paused, his expression growing even more serious. When the 5 elders departed for human space, they carried with them artifacts of immense power, the crown of stellar dominion, which could command the very stars to change their courses, the Void Ripper, a weapon capable of tearing holes in reality itself, the Soul Forge, which could reshape the fundamental nature of living beings. These were treasures accumulated over millions of years of dragon civilization, each one capable of destroying entire sectors of space. The fire images showed the 5 magnificent dragons departing from Pyraxis Prime, their forms wreathed in the power of these ancient artifacts. They were led by Elder Corinthia, whose golden scales had been forged in the heart of a dying star, and whose power was said to rival that of cosmic forces themselves. The expedition reached human space expecting to find a scattered collection of colonies, defended by the strange probability technology demonstrated at New Geneva, Zythak continued. What they found instead was something that challenged their understanding of what was possible. The images showed the 5 elders emerging from dimensional travel to find themselves surrounded by something unprecedented. Humanity had not built fleets, or fortresses, or weapons platforms. Instead, they had created what appeared to be a living network of consciousness that spanned multiple galaxies. Billions of humans, along with thousands of allied species, had linked their minds together into what they called the collective harmony, Zythak explained. Not a hive mind, like the cluster, which subsumed individual identity, but a voluntary network where each participant maintained their unique perspective while contributing to a greater whole. The Dragonlings watched in amazement as the fire images showed this vast network in action. Each node represented a different species, a different way of thinking and understanding reality. The crystalline Vex provided geometric precision. The ethereals offered multi-dimensional perspective. Various other species contributed their unique capabilities, and through it all, humans served as the connective tissue that bound the network together. The humans had discovered their true gift, Zythak said, his voice filled with something approaching reverence. They were translators of consciousness itself. Their short lifespans, their lack of individual power, their need to cooperate for survival. These had taught them to understand and bridge the gaps between completely different forms of awareness. Elder Corinthia and her companions found themselves facing not an enemy, but something they had never encountered before. A request for dialogue that came from an intelligence far vaster than any single mind could comprehend. The collective harmony spoke to the Dragon Elders, Zythak continued, and what it said changed everything. The fire images showed the moment of first contact, and the Dragonlings could almost hear the words that had shaken their ancestors to their very cores. "Welcome, ancient ones," Zythak recited, his voice taking on the formal cadence of historic quotation. "We have been waiting for you to come to us not as conquerors, but as beings ready to understand what we have learned about the nature of existence itself. Your species possesses something we have never encountered: the ability for a single consciousness to maintain coherent identity across vast timescales. Will you help us explore what becomes possible when such endurance is combined with our collective approach to reality?" The silence that followed this revelation was profound. The Dragonlings stared at their elder with expressions of confusion and growing awe. "They were not afraid of our most powerful elders?" Syrinx asked in a small voice. "They wanted to learn from them?" "More than that," Zythak replied. "They had been preparing for this moment since their first encounter with Vorthak. The collective harmony had studied dragon consciousness from a distance, and they had reached a conclusion that our kind had never considered. The ancient dragon's expression grew thoughtful, as if he were still processing truths learned long ago. Humans had realized that dragon consciousness and their own collective awareness were not opposites, but complementary aspects of something far greater. Dragons possessed the ability to maintain continuous identity and accumulated wisdom across millennia. Humans possess the ability to rapidly adapt, innovate, and connect different forms of consciousness together. The fire images showed what happened next, and it was unlike anything the young Dragonlings had imagined. Elder Corinthia and her companions were invited to participate in something called a consciousness synthesis event. Zythak continued. They would maintain their individual dragon nature and power, but temporarily link their minds with the collective harmony to explore the possibilities that such a combination might create. Young Corvain looked confused. But Elder, why would our ancestors agree to such a thing? Surely it was dangerous to allow alien minds access to dragon consciousness? Zythak's expression grew complex. Because, young one, the humans offered something that no dragon had ever been given before, the chance to experience the universe from perspectives other than their own, while still remaining fundamentally dragon. The images showed the 5 elders agreeing to the synthesis, their massive forms settling into meditation postures as the collective harmonies network slowly integrated their consciousness into its vast web. What they experienced in that joining, Zythak said softly, cannot be adequately described in words. For the first time in dragon history, our ancestors felt what it was like to see through 1,000,000 different eyes simultaneously, to think with the combined creativity of 1,000 different species, to understand the universe not just as individual conquerors, but as part of a greater cosmic consciousness. The fire images showed cascading waves of revelation and wonder, as the dragon elders experienced reality through the lens of collective awareness. At the same time, the collective harmony gained access to the deep, enduring wisdom that only came from consciousness maintained across millennia. The synthesis lasted only a few hours in normal time, Zythak continued. But within the accelerated awareness of the collective, they experienced subjective centuries of shared exploration and discovery. When the joining ended, both dragons and humans had been fundamentally changed. The ancient dragon paused, his eyes reflecting memories of profound significance. Elder Corinthia and her companions had learned something that shook them to their very essence, he said. They discovered that consciousness itself was evolving, that the universe was gradually awakening to its own nature through the interactions of different forms of awareness. Dragons represented one crucial aspect of this awakening, the preservation and accumulation of knowledge across vast timescales. Humans represented another, the ability to rapidly connect and synthesize different perspectives. Syrinx tilted her head, trying to understand. Does this mean the humans were actually helping the universe become more conscious? Exactly, Zythak confirmed. And more importantly, they had proven that dragons were not separate from or superior to this process, but essential participants in it. Our role was not to dominate other species, but to serve as the stable, enduring memory of cosmic consciousness as it continued to evolve. The fire images showed the return of the 5 elders to dragon space, but they were transformed beings. Their power remained intact, but their understanding of how to use it had expanded beyond anything previously imagined. When Corinthia and her companions shared their experience with the Dragon Council, Zythak continued. It sparked what historians now call the Great Awakening. Our entire species began to reconsider our place in the universe. Zythak. It sparked what historians now contact. The ancient dragon's expression grew proud and sad simultaneously. That was 3,000 years ago, he said. Since then, dragons and humans have worked together to explore the true nature of consciousness and reality. We have learned that individual power and collective cooperation are not opposing forces, but aspects of something far grander than either species could achieve alone. The Dragonlings sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what they had learned. But Elder, Corvain finally managed to ask, if this partnership has existed for 3,000 years, why do we young dragons know nothing of it? Why are we taught that humans are inferior beings? Why? Zythak's expression grew grave, and the fire dimmed slightly. Because, young ones, not all dragons accepted the new understanding. Some of our kind viewed the partnership with humans as a betrayal of dragon superiority. They established hidden enclaves like this one, where young dragons could be raised according to the old ways, believing themselves to be the rightful rulers of the galaxy. The truth hit the Dragonlings like a physical blow. They were not part of the main dragon civilization at all, but members of an isolated community clinging to outdated beliefs. The stunning secret I must share with you, Zythak continued, is that the dragons you see as your ancestors and role models, those who taught you to believe in dragon supremacy, are actually refugees from the true dragon civilization. They are beings who could not accept that our destiny lay not in domination, but in cooperation and mutual growth. The elder dragon stood slowly, his massive form casting long shadows in the firelight. Tomorrow, he said, representatives from the Dragon-Human Collective will arrive to offer you the same choice that was given to your parents and grandparents. You can remain here in isolation, clinging to beliefs that the universe has already outgrown. Or you can join the greater community of consciousness and discover what dragons can truly become when they embrace their role as partners in cosmic evolution. The fire flickered lower as Zythak prepared to leave the young dragons to contemplate their choice. The universe is vast and wonderful, little ones, he said as he moved toward the cavern entrance. But it is not ours to conquer. It is ours to explore, understand, and help evolve into something even more magnificent than any single species could imagine alone. As the ancient dragon disappeared into the darkness beyond the fire, the Dragonlings remained huddled together, their entire understanding of existence transformed by the tale they had heard. Above them, unknown to their isolated community, the stars themselves danced in patterns created by the combined will of dragons and humans, working together to guide the universe toward ever greater consciousness and beauty. The fire burned lower, but it would not go out. Like the partnership between their ancient species, it would continue to illuminate new possibilities for any who chose to see.